Hey everyone, I thought that I would make a video today on the process of making sauerkraut. It's pretty simple. Fermented foods are really beneficial for your gut biome. They add in beneficial bacteria that aid in digestion, and sauerkraut in particular has a lot of fiber, vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin K, vitamin B. You can get iron, copper, and calcium from it, magnesium, obviously sodium. And there is 4 ingredients: cabbage, salt, water. Sometimes add water. I'm gonna add water. And I like to add caraway seeds, but you don't have to add that if you don't like caraway seeds. And I'm going to do it the traditional way. I have a large crock that I like to use. Right now I'm using it as a plant stand. So I'm gonna rinse that out and I'm gonna show you step by step on how to do this. I hope the editing of this video goes well. So here is how you make sauerkraut. This is the crock that I'm going to be using. This one right here is turned upside down to prop my plants up so they can get more sunlight because my house doesn't get a lot of sun. I got my crock all cleaned. I put it on the floor because it's really big and heavy. And the next step now is to chop up all of the cabbage. And what I'm gonna do first is weigh the cabbage so that I know how much I have. All right, so I have my cabbages here. I have my pickling salt or canning salt. You can also use like pink Himalayan sea salt or regular sea salt. I just wouldn't recommend using iodized salt. You can always use kosher salt too. And I just have this caraway seeds that I got from G-Mart. And what you want to do is take the outer layer of the cabbage off. Just chopped the ends off of the cabbage because we're not going to be using that for sauerkraut. Now, what I'm going to do is place them on my super fancy scale that I have right here so that I can know how much they weigh. And let's see. It is about, let's see if you guys can see, that's really hard to do this. Let's just say it's 10 pounds. It's okay if you're off a little bit. Now there's multiple ways that you can shred the cabbage. I'm going to try with the mandolin. You have to be very careful with this because this is literally razor sharp. You can just chop them with a knife. If you do try with a mandolin, I suggest cutting the cabbage first because using this very large thing sometimes is cumbersome to hold. Put this guy in back. How this goes. And you can just check if you think that this is fine enough. Some people like their sauerkraut super fine. The first time that I did my sauerkraut, I just chopped it and it was annoying because there were some really big pieces in it. Kind of like it when it's a little bit finer. But all you have to do while you're doing this is take the stuff that you shredded and just put it into the crock. And if you don't have a crock, you can put them into little jars, but you have to measure out each little jar to know how much weight you're putting in it so you know how much salt you're going to use. Does that make sense? portion of the cabbage, and now what I have left is the stuff that it was too small and I didn't want to cut my fingers. So you can just chop this by hand. Again, be careful of your fingers. Make it as thin as you'd like. There's some thick pieces in there. I don't know if I said that before, but I like having some of the thicker textures. This is what the sauerkraut looks like at this point. That is how full the crock is. You can tell it's a pretty big crock, pretty substantial amount. I think that was 4 cabbages. And next what we have to do is add the salt. I'm now going to measure out the salt, and I need 90.72 grams of salt for 10 pounds of the cabbage. The little shelf on there and tare it. I'm switching to using this salt because my other salt apparently had mice get into it and I don't want to use that. Pretty gross, but it's the life of living in the country. So just keep pouring it on there until we get to 90.72. Okay, 90.9, that's okay. It's alright that we went over a little bit. You don't want to go over too much and you don't want to go under too much, because if you do, it affects the salinity of the brine, and if it's not salty enough, it can cause bad bacteria to grow, and if it's too salty, it can prevent the beneficial bacteria from growing. I'm going to add this to the cabbage, and then I'm going to reset the tripod and show you how to mash the cabbage. All you're doing is just punching and scrunching, and the reason why you're doing this is because it's starting to get the salt into the cabbage, and it's eventually going to start to allow the water, like osmosis, if you remember in science class, the water is going to go from the lowest concentration to the highest concentration of salt. So it's going to try to even it out. And because the cabbage has so much liquid in it, so much water in it, the water is going to come out of the cells, and that's when it starts to break down its rigidness. This is also really good if you have a lot of frustration. If you wanted to try to get that out, any pent up energy. You want to make sure that you continue to scoop up from the sides to make sure everything is getting mixed evenly. Granted, it's literally just salt and cabbage, but you want to make sure that the salt is getting distributed well. You can just squeeze it. You'll start to feel that the cells of the cabbage are starting to break down. It's getting a little bit wet. You can see. Can you see that? Or hear it at least. You can see that there's some liquid already starting to come out of them. You can see how this is really starting to, see the liquid that's starting to come out of that. You can just continue to pound this. You can let it sit for a little while too. You don't have to try to get all the liquid out of this all at once. If you let it sit, I would just suggest covering it up with a plate or a towel or something like that. And you can come back to it even if it's in an hour. I'm probably gonna come back to it in about maybe like 45 minutes. This has been like, what, 2 hours? And you can see how much lower it got. And look at all the liquid that's starting to come out of it. You can even hear the how much more liquid there is. You You want to make sure that when you make this is actually a brine, that the brine is completely covering the cabbage. I've noticed that in mine that I need to actually make a little bit more brine to pour over it, but I'm just gonna work at this a little bit longer just to see what kind of liquid I can get out of it, and then I'm going to come back and see if I need to pour some water over it. I completely forgot to add the caraway seeds, so I'm going to do that now. You can see, I hope you can see, how much liquid is in there. All of the cabbage needs to be completely covered with the liquid. If it's not, then it can start to get moldy, and then your batch can get ruined, and so all of your work will be for nothing. I'm going to also account for evaporation because it's the winter time and I have the heat on. It's pretty dry in here, so I'm gonna make a solution of salt water, a brine, and I'm going to add it to that mix. 4 cups of water with a tablespoon of sea salt. I poured it over the brine. And now everything is completely covered. And what you want to make sure is that you don't have anything on the sides. So I'm just wiping it down with my hand, but I'm also going to go in with a paper towel or a sponge and just make sure there's nothing on the sides. My tripod broke, so I need to hold the phone from now on. What you're gonna do next is you wanna make sure that everything stays submerged in the brine, so underneath the liquid. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a plate and I'm gonna place it into there, press it down, and lift it up a couple times. Just want to make sure everything is fully submerged. So that side seems like it's up kind of high. Everything is fully submerged. You can see how some of that stuff, some of the cabbage is floating on the top. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to place this plastic container in there, and this may or may not work. I did this last time. And you want a weight to be in there so that the plate can get held down. You want to make sure that all of this stuff that's kind of poking up gets pushed back down. So you can do that carefully all along the sides, and kind of press it underneath the plate. And I have no idea if back in the day they used to put something over it like this. I tried fermenting, I think it was my first time, without the plate and without something, a weight holding it down, and some of the sauerkraut got kind of moldy on top because it wasn't fully submerged. You can continuously add more brine if you want to throughout the fermentation process. But the last 2 times that I did this, I did it in this way and it worked out right. So I'm going to continue pressing this down, making sure everything is underneath there. All right, well, this is almost the end of this first step of making sauerkraut. I put this Tupperware container, this last one, inside of this crock because the little plastic container, it wasn't allowing the weight to stand up without falling over. Again, you can add another weight if you want to. You want to make sure that it's not sealed, so I'm just going to be putting this towel over it, and that'll help keep any fruit flies and dust or hair out, which I have a dog who's very hairy and sheds all the time, so that's really useful. And I would suggest to come and check on this. You can check on it every day if you want to. I check on it every couple of days, but you're gonna allow this to sit for a month. You wanna make sure that the heat of your place doesn't get too cold and it doesn't get too hot. I think they say that the average should stay around like 68 or something like that. I don't know. I let my house get cooler than that. The only thing that's going to happen is if it gets cooler, then it's just going to take a little bit longer for the fermentation process. I found that it takes pretty much just about 1 month for this to happen. So you have your little baby here, growing all of the beneficial bacteria for you. And one thing that you might notice if you are using a crock, I noticed that sometimes that the salt leaches through. The liquid doesn't leach through, but I just noticed that sometimes the minerals from the salt come through. So that's it. And we're gonna come back in a month and I'll show you what's next. It has been almost exactly 2 weeks. And I've tested the sauerkraut and it tastes sour enough and I like the crunchiness that it's at right now. This is the fastest that it's ever fermented for me. So that's why you need to keep checking it every once in a while. This is what it looks like. Kind of, you can't really tell the same. It's just a little bit, it's still crunchy and it's tart. So it's ready for me. If you really wanted to, you can let it ferment a little bit longer. The only thing that's really going to happen to it is it's going to get even more sour and it's going to get more mushy. And I don't really like it when it's that mushy. I like having a little bit of crunch in my sauerkraut. So I'm going to can this. I'm just going to be putting it into mason jars. Just a little bit of liquid left at the bottom of the crock. Oh god, see just that a little bit. And what I'm going to do is just pour that into the mason jars so that there's a little bit of liquid so that it doesn't really get dried out. Not that it would, but you want to have a little bit of liquid in there. And if you wanted to, you could even make more brine because it's never really going to stop fermenting. You just want to make sure that you wipe down the outsides of the jar, kind of common sense. Just make sure that it's nice and clean. Like I said, it's not going to stop fermenting. The fermentation process is just going to slow down. And so you can put the lid on tightly. And then you just put it in the fridge. I kept mine in the fridge for a couple of months and it was fine. Like up to 6 months, it was fine. You can just continue to taste it, and like I said, it's going to continue to ferment, so it's only going to get even more beneficial bacteria. So, thanks for watching this fun sauerkraut making adventure, and until next time, guys. Oh yeah, don't forget to subscribe.